Well, it's Manx Radio we're at. It's about 2-something in the morning. We've been invited on the panel, and I thought, before I let you go home, gentlemen, who look like you're going line dancing or something here, but that was mentioned. Wow, what do you think of what's happened tonight and the results?
Well, I think some of them were a surprise, but generally I think if you look at it, a lot of the votes that came out from things you'd picked up and heard were to be expected, and you can't be 100% sure until the count has happened, but there was certainly lots of whispers about things that people were or might not get in and so on, and I think that's been shown in the results.
Your shockers?
Well, disappointments, I think, really, to see two members go who I think were working well and hard, and that's Paul Quine, who'd only been in for just over a year, I think, and Ralph Peake. I'm sorry to see them both go, but, you know, that's politics.
4 ministers, wasn't it, that came, a cropper, I think it was, tonight? 4. 2 obviously in Peel as well. I mean, that was Mr. Boot, get very low.
Very low indeed, yeah. Well, I mean, Jeff, bless him, didn't carry the House, and clearly he hasn't carried the constituency either. But very, very pleased for Kate Lord Brennan. Excellent campaign, and she'll make a first-class MHK.
And I think it's interesting that the two MLCs who decided to stand both got elected. They have limited experience, but they have experience of Tynwald, and I'm sure they've used that to their advantage because they have an understanding of how Tynwald operates, what it does, about the working of government, and that does help you. They didn't have constituents, but now they have, and I think that's an interesting sort of shift in how things have gone.
And yeah, the gender balance there, that's another significant change. Yeah, and that we're obviously going to see a different gender balance in the new Council of Ministers when that's formed.
Yeah. So with the two MLCs coming down, who do you see the potential of ex-MHKs going up?
Well, personally, I would like to see some ex-MHKs, excluding myself.
Yes.
I'm not putting a bid in. No. Step up because when we elected the last 2 or 3 sets of LegCo members, we moved away really from having ex-MHKs as members, and on balance I think the general view towards the end of the last House was that we need to rebalance it a little bit, and you know, I do hope that if Graham's listening to this, that Graham Curgene considers standing for LegCo.
Yeah, your thoughts on that? Do you think it's good, bad?
Well, I mean, clearly there are going to be 2 new MLCs because that's what's required under the law. Whether Graham or others who have not been successful decide to put the name forward, it's very difficult. I mean, it's a very difficult time for them. No matter what we all think about politics, you know, it must be awful to be defeated at the polls, and the impact it has on you personally and your family, and they will move on. Lots have had to do that before. Whether they'll want to at this stage say, yes, I'm going to go back into politics, is always a difficult thing. But one thing is sure, whoever goes into the Legislative Council are going to be outsiders if it's not a previous member like that.
Tim Baker, do you think it was a problem that did him in, or even those up there, and Aaron Michael?
Well, I think what we've seen, particularly with the ministers this evening, is that a sense in the constituencies that, you know, are you really focused enough on the constituency? And in Tim Baker's case, of course, he did take a lot on. I mean, he was DOI, he was chairman of the meat company, chairman of MUA, and in those areas had 1 or 2 significant problems, and I think it just all became too much, frankly.
I think there's also a need, I think, from what we've seen, for a re-examination of whether or not the 2-seat constituencies, having 12 of them, is actually the best way forward for the Isle of Man. It's in its 2nd time it's been used, and, you know, you take this point that Chris has just said about whether or not they spent enough time in their constituency, and it is a problem when it's such a big constituency.
So Mr. Boot and Mr. Harmer both out.
Well, and it wasn't just them. I mean, there was others, and the similar sort of situation where the voters, the number of voters, the number of people living in the constituency is now quite large. Now, it's still not massive, but our structures are different. It's very personal politics. we're used to dealing with small numbers of voters, and whether or not this system is the best for the Isle of Man is something that I think should be examined, just to say, how is it working? Personally, and I've made this clear before, I don't agree with it. I think, likes of Castletown, Peel, Middle, they've lost that identity because they're absorbed into
so you have ones and twos and threes and whatever.
Well, or you have 24 single seats.
Okay.
I mean, there's different options. All I'm saying is, this system was brought in. It's the second time the elections used the system, and maybe it's worth government saying, let's examine it to see if it actually is working, because look at the impact it is having.
You're a fan, though, of the transferable vote, weren't you? The 1, 2 and all that sort of thing.
And the reason I'm a fan of that is because if in a situation where the Isle of Man we have independence, where we don't have party politics dominant, what you end up with an STV system is that the power is in the hands of the voter. You can't get in on a minority vote, and you can't come in second. You have to get 50 plus 1% of the vote at least to get elected, and that means you've got to work harder.
Right. I take Tony's points, but I think there's so much now facing the new House that any possibility of changes of that nature will really go right to the back of the queue, and big issues ahead now.
Well, yes, but can I just say, it's not something necessarily would be examined by the members, because it wasn't last time. It was actually put in place by a body that was set up by the government. And they were outsiders who sat down and said, this is how we make it work. One of the things I believe they didn't take, or not one of the things, a number of things they didn't take into account was the issue of the different communities and how they operate. And they based it purely on numbers. And they basically said, we want so many people per constituency. The best way to achieve that is have 2 seats.
The vote looked overall down in most areas, although South, which had this new testing idea of using any of the polling stations, appears, I think if we've got the numbers right, held up or even went up.
You make an interesting point there, and it might be true. I don't know enough about it to be able to give you a sensible response. But I do think there's something deeper that we've got to think about, and that is how people understand that they're engaging with those they directly elect, but there's still a gap between the electorate and the formation of policy going forward, and there's some serious work got to be done now to have the electorate feel that they remain engaged in what becomes the policy programme for the following 5 years.
To finish with, I know the answer that you're going to tell me. Chief Minister will be
if I had my way, I won't be there, but no. Alf Cannon.
Well, I have no view because I haven't worked with these members. It would be unreasonable for me to say I think it should be that person, because I've never worked with them. Yeah. I know them from an outside point of view, and some of them I don't even know. I've never seen them. So, I can say what I hear, and the favourite I hear is likely to be Alf Cannon. But I couldn't judge that because I'm not in that position. I haven't worked with them.
Okay. Has democracy been done tonight on the island?
Yes, it has.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what it's about. And it's a strange democracy. It's unique to the Isle of Man, and it works for us. Wouldn't work elsewhere in a big country. So, we've got what we've got now, and those 24 people have got grave responsibilities to look after our interests.